Dear colleagues, let me present the results of my research for the conference Callings 2023. Well, the topic of the research is corpus-based analysis of poetic actualization of emotions in English Romanticism, Lviv Polytechnic National University. The study of feelings and emotions has already extended the boundaries of psychology and is actively carried out by philosophers, political science, historians, cultural scientists, anthropologists, educators, and linguists. That the variety of approaches from the perspective of which these problems are treated informs the topicality of the research of linguistic and literary verbalization of emotions and feelings in the context of different epochs and different artistic movements. William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge are two of the most significant figures of the English and European Romanticism. Together, they co-authored the groundbreaking collection of poetry, lyrical ballads, which marked the beginning of the Romantic movement in English literature. Wordsworth and Coleridge has a significant influence on other Romantic writers such as Percy Bysshe Shelley and John Keats. Their ideas about poetry, nature, and the sublime helped to shape the literary movement as a whole. One of the primary ways that Shelley and Keats influenced the Romantic movements was through their emphasis on emotions and imaginations. Both poets believed that poetry should be a vehicle for expressing intense feelings and exploring the limits of the imagination. Another way that Shelley and Keats contributed to the development of English Romanticism was through their use of language of emotions and imagery of emotions. So that's why the works of these four famous English poets were considered and were chosen as the basis of our research. This study focuses on analyzing the use of emotional nouns in poetic texts to determine their stylistic and pragmatic function, as well as their role in creating a romantic poetic picture of the world. Using a corpus-based approach and computer programs for text semantic analysis, the study analyzes the frequency, combinability, and distribution of emotion words to identify the author's individual tendency in poetic actualization of emotions and their participation in dominant metaphoric ways of conceptualizing emotions. The research finds that the variability of emotion words is the leading characteristics of the idiostyle, which is a factor in developing the author's poetic picture of reality. The study analyzes 9,107 poetic contexts containing emotion nouns to identify dominant associative connections in creative emotional images. Human emotional states are diverse and versatile and are realized in a wide spectrum of manifestations that encompass emotions and feelings, which, being subjective by nature, are determined by different external and internal factors of human existence. The methodology of a corpus-based approach realized in this paper by means of the computer programs of text semantic analysis, TROPES and ANCONG, presupposes the following tasks and procedures: the analysis of the frequency and combinability and distribution of emotion words that denote or depict emotions with the purpose of defining their stylistic and pragmatic functions, and their participation in actualizing the dominating metaphoric ways of conceptualizing emotions. The performance of the described algorithm allows disclosing the author's individual tendency in poetic actualization of emotions and their role in creating the romantic poetic picture of the world. The frequency and distribution of emotion words in poetic discourse of the four defined authors allows identifying authors' individual poetic preferences in conceptualization of emotions and draw a conclusion concerning the variability of emotion words as the leading characteristic of the idiostyle. The frequency and combinability of selected emotion nouns were analyzed by application of concordance methods, and this stage of the research helped to identify the dominating metaphoric models of poetic actualization of emotions in the discourse of each author and to define dominating associative connections in creative emotional images. There has been preceded, as I have already said, 9,107 of poetic contexts that contain emotion nouns. By application of Tropes program, I identified the configuration of the reference field emotions in the poetic discourse of William Wordsworth. It was established the density of emotion nouns in the poetic texts, which constitute 693 units, and variability of lexical representation of the referential field feelings, 51 nouns. Feelings and emotions of positive, negatives, and neutral spectrum have been defined, so you can see them on the slide. We can observe practically even distribution of emotions and feelings of positive and negative spectrum. To establish the models of metaphorization, I selected 10 emotion nouns with different frequency and with the help of Antcon program, analyzed the contextual realization of their meaning and combinability. So these nouns are sorrow, delight, despair, pain, joy, solitude, hope, love, misery, and their frequency are indicated in the brackets. The identified metaphoric models include, so the feeling is an agent, creature, parent, thing, contained, container, power, gift, precious thing, and liquid. Emotion and feeling can act as a cause of physical or spiritual transformation, experiencing positive or negative states or sensations. So that's why the associative connections between love, pain, and bliss, sorrow and pain, joy and sweetness, guilt and pain, sorrow, fear, were established that display the tendency of metaphorizing emotions and feelings through related emotions, feelings, sensations, states, and experience. However, there is no possibility to speak about direct correlation between the frequency of emotional concept and frequency of their metaphorization. Emotion nouns with zero metaphorization in the context of William Wordsworth's poetry is the noun misery. Emotion nouns are frequently used in fixed episodes, being ascribed some characteristics of intensity, modality of expressiveness. So, for example, cheerful, hope, lawful, joy, sorrowful, fear, guilty, fair, and so on. Similar stages of analysis have been applied to poetic discourses of other poets. Again, so by application of Tropes program and similar algorithms, I identified the configuration of the reference field feelings in poetic discourse of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It was established the density of emotion nouns in poetic context, which constitute 1,790 units, and variability of emotion nouns that constitute the referential field feeling, 100 nouns. The results of Coleridge poetic discourse analysis revealed the great coincidence in the spectrum of emotional concepts between Coleridge and Wordsworth. The list of common and specific emotions nouns you can see on the slide. The perceptible high degree of emotional density and variability of poetic context in Coleridge discourse can be explained by the richer synonymic variations of basic emotional concepts and the presence of emotions of high intensity and expressivity in his poetic discourse. So the spectrum of positive, negative, and neutral emotions have also been defined. So we can observe practically even distribution of emotions and feelings of positive, negative, and neutral spectrum. To establish the models of metaphorization, I analyzed 10 emotion nouns that are common for poetic discourses of both authors, Coleridge and Wordsworth, and 5 emotion nouns that are specific for Coleridge's discourse with different frequency. The identified metaphoric models include emotion is a spirit, agent, mysterious creature, natural phenomenon, physical phenomenon, substance, flower, plant, disease, pain, doom, fate, power, container, or the thing contained. Duality, complexity, and ambivalence of emotional concepts is displayed by their possible transformations, for example, joy into sorrow, hope into despair, and vice versa, as well as by the number of oxymoron. For example, the gentle violence of joy, warm tear of joy, joy in tears, gloomy joy. However, there is no possibility to speak about direct correlation between frequency of emotional concept and frequency of their metaphorization. Emotion nouns with zero metaphorization in Coleridge poetic discourse is premonition. Emotion nouns are frequently used in fixed episodes, being ascribed some characteristics of intensity and modality of expressiveness. It has been observed a tendency of frequent associations of positive emotions with voice, music, light, and negative emotions with load, flame, scream, torture, suffering that constitute the semantic grounds of episodes, similes, and metaphors. The performed analysis displayed only a general surface configuration of the space of poetic conceptualization of emotions and feelings in poetries of the first older generations of English Romantic poets, the analytical potential of the applied computer instruments is limited. However, it can substantiate the idea about the general feature of poetic discourse of either author and to arrive at conclusions based on the comparative analysis. William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge are two of the most influential poets of Romantic era. Their works are characterized by a deep appreciation for nature, a focus on individual experience, and an exploration of the human imaginations. Wordsworth's poetic system can be seen in his famous preface to the lyrical ballad, where he argues that poetry should be written in the language of ordinary people and that the subject matter should be drawn from the lives and experience of everyday individuals. Wordsworth's use of language is both highly expressive and reserved in terms of avoiding extensive use of imagery. Wordsworth's poetry is marked by its emotiveness and expressivity and his ability to convey powerful emotions through clear and direct language. Though the imagination through the imagination, Wordsworth believed that the poet could reveal deeper truths about human experience and natural world. Coleridge's poetic system, on the other hand, was more focused on the power of the imagination. Coleridge poetry is known for its ability to evoke complex emotions in the reader, from love to joy to loss and despair. His use of vivid imagery and symbolism allows him to explore deep emotional themes in the way that resonates with reader. Thus, while both Wordsworth and Coleridge shared a deep appreciation for nature, a focus on individual experience, and an exploration of the human imagination, their poetic systems differed in terms of their emphasis on the role of the poet and power of imagination itself, and the stylistic and conceptual dominates. These complex differences in poetic systems of both authors is specifically reflected in the ways of poetic actualization of emotions, difference in the volume of an emotional lexicon, as well as in the richness of metaphoric models of emotional concepts actualization. Coleridge poetic discourse is characterized by the greater variety of emotional concepts, richness of their synonymic representation, and diversity of the ways of metaphorization. Other poets, Shelley and Keats, were two, again, though the most important and influential poets of Romantic era, but taking into consideration all mentioned above, I could hypothesize that the difference in poetic worldview of the representatives of the younger generation of English Romanticism manifests itself in the specificity of emotional concepts verbalization in their poetic discourses. By application, the tropes program and following the similar algorithm, I defined the configuration of the reference feelings in poetic discourse of Percy Bysshe Shelley. The density of emotional concepts in Shelley's poetry is 5,197 units. However, the variability of emotional nouns does not exceed the number of 84 items. Most emotion nouns coincide with Coleridge ones. There have been identified the following specific nouns that you can see on the slide. However, we also observed the direct correlation between the frequency of emotion noun and degree of its metaphorization. So the more frequent is the noun, the greater is the number of metaphors, episode similes created by them. So the frequency and the list of nouns you can see on the slide. The defined metaphorics in poetic discourse of Shelley include emotion, feeling is spirit, agent, mysterious creature, natural phenomenon, physical phenomenon, substance, flower, plant, doom, fate, power, container, or the thing contained, infinity, eternity, depth. The richness of Shelley's emotional representation of reality is sustained by oxymorons. Emotion nouns are frequently used in fixed episodes, being ascribed some characteristic of intensity and modality of expression. And most of these imagery models of emotion conceptualization correspond to the characteristics of Coleridge poetic discourse. By application, so the similar algorithm, I identified the configuration of the reference field feelings in poetic discourse of John Keats. The emotional density of Keats' poetic discourse is 1,445 units. The variability of emotional concepts is rather low, and the general palette is in coincidence with emotional concepts of his fellow poets, Coleridge and Shelley. The most frequent and productive nouns in terms of their participation in imagery poetic resources are the nouns pleasure, sorrow, pain, hope, delight, joy, love, grief, and bliss. The identified metaphoric models include emotion and feeling is spirit, agent, mysterious creature, natural phenomenon, physical phenomenon, substance, flower, plant, bird, light, flame, container or the thing contained, beauty, and voice. Emotion nouns are frequently used in fixed episodes, being ascribed some characteristics of intensity and modality of expressiveness. The poetics of Keats, though not much variegated in terms of difference or intense synonymy, is characterized by the complexity of emotional concepts, poetic representation. Among them, there are sustained metaphors, complex metaphors, personifications, and complex episodes that embody the richness of author's imagination, his desire to describe the emotion in all subtleties of its nature. So, for example, his every sense had grown ethereal for pleasure, while his head flew a delight half graspable. Thus, both poets, representatives of the younger generation of English Romanticism, as we assumed, are characterized by a different principles of poetic representation of emotions. By a rather limited number of poetic emotion nouns, Keats creates emotional intensity of poetry due to the complexity of emotional images, extension of emotional nouns, contextual pragmatics, while the discourse of Shelley is the most prolific in the number of poetic contexts that contain emotional nouns as such, and by the realization of conventional metaphoric models characteristic for his older poet compatriots. Their density and contextual aggregation creates the vivid, perceptible, detailed description of emotions. Both Shelley and Keats employed a range of poetic systems to explore their individual perspectives of life, love, nature, and the human existence. One of the key differences in poetic systems and in poetic visions of the four analyzed poets constitute the difference in their ways they conceptualize emotions and represent the emotional images. For example, in contrast with the younger poets, Wordsworth and Coleridge placed greater emphasis on the nature and the ordinary experience of everyday life. They believed that through contemplation of nature and a focus on the common man, they could find spiritual renewal and moral guidance. Keats and Shelley, on the other hand, emphasized the sensual and aesthetic parameters of emotional world perception. They, especially Keats, so creates and sought to create a poetry of sensation that would engage the reader's emotions and imaginations. He saw the beauty in everyday objects and experiences and sought to capture that beauty in his poetry. Wordsworth and Coleridge, by contrast, were more concerned with exploring the spiritual and philosophical implication of the nature of emotions. This time, thus we can conclude the following. So that the study focused on the lexical unit that represents emotions and their role in creating the romantic poetic picture of the world in the poetry of English Romanticism. The application of corpus techniques and computer-assisted frequency and distribution analysis enables to perform a comparative analysis of the ways of poetic actualization of emotions by different forces. The study shows the importance of emotions and feelings in poetic discourse and their impact on the development of English Romanticism. It reveals the diversity of poetic systems of Romanticism through the prism of emotional concept verbalization. As the application of the described computer tools is limited in their analytical potential and is not able to disclose the implicit ways of poetic conceptualization of the selected phenomena, emotions in romantic poetry can be studied through other literary techniques and analytical methods such as close reading, comparative analysis, and semantic analysis. A study of the historical and cultural context of Romantic poetry can provide insights into the prevailing emotions, attitudes, and beliefs of the period, and how they are reflected in the poetry. So, thank you for your attention.